Wild. From Lost to Found on the Pacific Crest Trail by Cheryl Strayed. Picture yourself perched on the edge of a steep mountain, miles from another living soul. Your body is screaming after 38 days of relentless hiking. You slip off your boots to give your destroyed feet a precious moment of relief. Then your massive backpack tips over, and in slow-motion horror, you watch one boot launch into the air, bounce across the trail, and disappear over the cliff into the forest below. Gone. Utterly unretrievable. So what do? You're standing there holding its partner. One boot is completely useless now, an orphan. In a moment of raw frustration, mixed with grief and a wild sense of liberation, you hurl the other boot after it, with everything you've got, watching it tumble into the trees and out of your existence. And just like that, you're truly alone, barefoot, 26 years old, completely and utterly lost. But here's the thing, this isn't where everything falls apart. This is right in the middle of something transformative. And every word of it actually happened. Today we're diving into a book that's resonated with millions across the globe. Cheryl Strayed's extraordinary memoir, Wild. This isn't just another hiking adventure. It's become a lifeline for anyone who's ever felt shattered, adrift, or desperately searching for a fresh start. At its heart, it wrestles with one of life's most urgent questions. When everything falls apart, how do you piece yourself back together? By the time we reach the end of this journey, you'll understand the profound truth Cheryl discovered, not in some therapist's office or between the pages of a self-help manual, but out in the fierce, unforgiving beauty of America's wild places. You'll see how the heaviest loads we carry can become our greatest teachers, and how sometimes the only path to healing runs straight through the pain, one agonizing step at a time. This is about hitting absolute rock bottom and then deciding to climb a mountain. Every transformative journey starts somewhere, but some beginnings are so devastating they feel more like endings. For Cheryl Strayed, that ending arrived on a bitter day in a sterile room at the Mayo Clinic. She was 22, the same age her mother had been while pregnant with her. And in that room, she learned her vibrant, 45-year-old mother, the absolute center of her universe, was dying of lung cancer. This wasn't just heartbreaking news. It was the complete obliteration of her world. Cheryl's mother wasn't simply a parent. She was a force of nature. After escaping an abusive marriage with 3 small children, she'd tell them, "We aren't poor because we're rich in love." She moved her family to a remote plot in the Minnesota Northwoods, building a house from scratch, without electricity or running water, teaching resilience, not through lectures, but through living it. At 40, she enrolled in college alongside Cheryl, earning perfect grades and sharing a major with her daughter. Her love, as Cheryl remembers it, was full-throated and all-encompassing and unadorned. It was everything. And then, just 49 days after her diagnosis, it was gone. Her mother's death didn't just crack Cheryl's life, it shattered it completely. The family she'd known dissolved overnight. Her stepfather, the man she considered her real dad, became distant. Her siblings, drowning in their own grief, drifted away. And Cheryl, who desperately tried holding everyone together, finally gave up and scattered too. Over the next 4 years, she threw herself off every edge she could find. Her marriage to Paul, a genuinely good man she still loved, crumbled under the weight of her grief and betrayals. She bounced between meaningless jobs, slept with more men than she could count, and flirted dangerously with heroin, desperately trying to numb pain too enormous to hold. A stranger once called her an actual stray, and he wasn't wrong. She was wandering without direction, without home, without anchor. She stared up from the bottom of a dark well, with no idea how to climb out. Then one day, standing in line at an outdoor store in Minneapolis, she picked up a guidebook, The Pacific Crest Trail, Volume 1, California. She read about a continuous wilderness trail running from Mexico to Canada, following the spine of the Western Mountains. It was, she writes, an idea vague and outlandish, full of promise and mystery. Something sparked inside her in that moment. She decided she'd walk that line, alone. For 100 days, she'd never been backpacking, not once. She knew absolutely nothing about long-distance hiking, but she also had nothing left to lose. The woman she'd been was gone. Maybe this impossibly difficult journey could help her find her way back. Maybe it could transform her back into the girl her mother had raised, strong, clear-eyed, and good. That's where the real journey began. Not with the first step on the trail, but with the decision to take it. She sold nearly everything she owned, finalized her divorce, and packed dozens of boxes with dehydrated meals to mail to herself at stops along the way, places like Echo Lake and Bernie Falls that existed only as dots on a map. Then, in the summer of 1995, she found herself in Mojave, California, the night before departure. The reality of her decision started sinking in. In her motel room, she spread out all her gear, a mountain of carefully chosen, brand-new equipment. A water purifier, a tiny stove, a sleeping bag, a tent, a compass she couldn't use, and the manual teaching her how to use it that she hadn't read. And the backpack, a forest green monster that would become both her closest companion and cruelest tormentor. She started cramming everything inside, and when it wouldn't fit, she used bungee cords to strap the overflow to the outside. Her tent, food bag, sleeping pad, sandals, even a football-sized camera case. Finally, she filled her water bottles and a massive 2.6-gallon dromedary bag, adding nearly 25 pounds of water alone. When she finished, the pack stood before her like some monstrous entity. She nicknamed it Monster, and when she bent down to lift it, nothing happened. It wouldn't budge an inch. It was, she says, like trying to lift a Volkswagen Beetle. Panic set in. How could she hike over 1,000 miles if she couldn't even lift her pack in an air-conditioned motel room? Desperate, she sat on the floor, threaded her arms through the straps, and hurled herself forward onto hands and knees. Slowly, painfully, using a metal cooling unit on the wall for support, she staggered upright. The pack towered over her head, crushing her shoulders, gripping her like a vice. This was it. This was her burden. Taking a deep breath, she opened the door and stepped into the desert light. The first days on the trail weren't just difficult. They were a uniquely brutal kind of hell. The Pacific Crest Trail, she quickly discovered, isn't some gentle nature walk. It's rugged, wild, and unforgiving. Her journey began in the Mojave Desert, a landscape of beige, barren mountains, Joshua trees, and merciless sun. Monster's weight was crushing. Each step felt monumental. Her feet, crammed into boots a size too small, blistered almost immediately. The muscles in her back and shoulders burned with searing pain. Within an hour, a voice in her head was screaming, "What have I gotten myself into?" She was utterly alone. Days passed without seeing another human. Her only companions were wilderness sounds and her own fears. She was terrified of rattlesnakes, expecting them around every bend. She spotted mountain lion tracks and spent an entire day singing "Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star" at full volume, hoping to scare it off. Her inexperience was painfully obvious. She bought the wrong fuel for her stove, making hot meals impossible. She accidentally brushed a Joshua tree, which stabbed her arm and made it bleed profusely. When she opened her first aid kit, winds scattered all her bandages down the mountain. She was a walking disaster, except none of it felt funny. Exhaustion consumed her, physical and mental. The trail wasn't just walking. It was constant warfare against gravity, terrain, and her own body. Climbing was torture, but descending brought a new hell as she braced against each step to avoid tumbling forward. She felt less like a person and more like a building with legs, careening through wilderness. Just over a week in, she made a tough call. With her stove broken and running out of cold food, she veered off trail down remote logging roads, hoping to find a highway in town to regroup. For 8 days, she'd seen no one. Now, walking a dirt road in absolute nowhere, the silence and isolation pressed in hard. She felt like the last person on earth. Just as tears threatened, she saw it, a yellow pickup with 3 men inside, miners. Relief flooded through her, mixed with a tingle of fear. She was a woman alone with 3 strangers in the middle of nowhere. But the men were kind. One named Frank took her home to his wife, Annette. They lived in a desert trailer. Annette fed her a massive meal of barbecued ribs, potato salad, and canned corn. It tasted so good she nearly cried. The next day, Frank dropped her at a highway, where she hitched a ride with a chip delivery man named Troy to Ridgecrest. In Ridgecrest, she was a spectacle, a filthy, smelly woman with a giant backpack. A drifter on a bicycle called her sister, offering bread and bologna. He thought she was one of him, a homeless wanderer. In a way, she was. She got her stove fixed, bought supplies, and stayed overnight in a motel run by a kind Vietnam vet named Bud. Bud was the first to warn her about the snow. It had been a record snowfall year in the Sierra Nevada, the massive mountain range ahead. The trail, as he put it, was entirely socked in. This was a turning point. Cheryl hadn't prepared for record snow. She had an ice axe being mailed to her next stop, but no idea how to use it. The wilderness she'd imagined wasn't the one she was facing. But she pushed on anyway. She hitched back to the trail and began the next leg toward Kennedy Meadows, gateway to the High Sierra. The terrain grew more challenging. She crossed treacherous rock slides where trail had been wiped out, legs trembling with each step. One day she looked up to see an enormous horned animal charging at her. "Moose!" she screamed, though she knew it was a bull. Panicking, she scrambled into sharp bushes beside the trail and blew the world's loudest whistle hanging around her neck. When she opened her eyes, the bull was gone. Clinging to those bushes, terrified, she realized a profound truth about her journey. She had only 2 options: go forward or go back. The bull could be in either direction, so she could only choose between the bull taking her forward and the bull taking her back. And so she walked on. After 11 grueling solo days, she finally met another hiker. His name was Greg, a 40-year-old accountant from Tacoma. He was a seasoned backpacker, a gearhead who knew everything about the trail. His presence brought both comfort and stark reminder of her incompetence. He'd been planning for years, had trained properly. His pack was half the size of hers. He averaged 22 miles daily. She barely managed 10 or 12. Greg confirmed Bud's warning. The High Sierra was buried in snow. Most hikers had quit, deciding to bypass the entire section or return another year. "We picked the wrong year to hike the PCT," he told her, but Greg also offered encouragement. "You're green, but you're tough," he said. "And tough is what matters most out here." His words lifted her. When she finally reached Kennedy Meadows, a small outpost serving as a major hiker stop, she was no longer alone. She met up with Greg, and soon other hikers trickled in. A father-son team named Albert and Matt, and 2 young men from the East Coast, Doug and Tom. For the first time, she had a tribe. Albert, a kind, no-nonsense Eagle Scout from Georgia, took one look at Monster and offered to lighten her load. He went through her pack item by item, creating a get-rid-of pile. Out went the foldable saw she'd never used, miniature binoculars, giant camera flash. Out went deodorant, razor, and, to her immense embarrassment, a fat roll of a dozen condoms. When finished, her pack was significantly lighter. Still the biggest of the bunch, but now she could actually lift it from the ground. She felt like she could leap into the air. Together, the small group debated what to do about the snow. The consensus: hiking through hundreds of miles of deep, treacherous snow would be foolish, especially for someone as inexperienced as Cheryl. Doug and Tom, a bit naive and full of youthful bravado, decided to push on, but Greg, the expert, decided to bypass. Reluctantly, Cheryl made the same choice. Skipping the most beautiful part of California's trail, the part John Muir called the Range of Light, felt like failure, but it was sensible. So with Greg, she hitched a series of rides, taking buses from Lone Pine, California to Reno, Nevada, then to Truckee, California, leapfrogging over 450 miles. The bypass was strange and disorienting. One minute she was in deep wilderness. The next, a smoky Reno casino at 4 in the morning, feeling like she'd landed on another planet. She had only a handful of dollars, a fact that filled her with low-grade panic. But in a Reno bus station restroom, she met a woman who noticed the black raven feather Doug had given her, wedged into her pack's frame, and told her it symbolized the void. "It's the place where things are born, where they begin," the woman explained. After hitchhiking the final 45 miles, she arrived in Sierra City, a tiny mountain town where she'd rejoined the trail. The trail here was still buried in snow, far more than anticipated. The day she set out from Sierra City, she found herself trudging through an endless, disorienting field of white. The trail had vanished, buried. Greg, who'd hiked ahead, was nowhere in sight. She was lost. For days, she navigated through snow alone, using her map, compass, and guidebook descriptions. It was terrifying, all-consuming work. Each step was a calculated guess. She was cold, wet, and scared. At one point, she encountered skiers on a distant ridge. "Where are we?" she screamed across the snowy expanse. After several tries, they finally heard her. "California!" they yelled back in unison, laughing. She wasn't lost. She was in serious trouble. But she refused to turn back. She kept pushing forward, driven by stubborn resolve she didn't know she possessed. One afternoon, resting on a fallen tree, a red fox walked silently into the clearing. It stopped, looked at her peacefully, then continued on its way. Watching the fox disappear, something broke inside her. "Mom! Mom! Mom!" she screamed into the silent woods, a raw, primal cry she didn't know was coming. After 5 days lost in snow, she finally found a logging road and walked out of the wilderness. She was out of the High Sierra, but troubles weren't over. Her feet were wrecked, and the boots, causing so much pain, were falling apart. Then came the moment from our story's beginning. Sitting on a slope, she accidentally knocked one boot over the mountain's edge. After a moment of stunned disbelief, she threw the other after it. Barefoot, she had to repair her flimsy camp sandals with duct tape, creating pathetic metal-gray booties. In these, she walked for days through desolate, logged-out landscape, getting lost again in a maze of logging roads before finally finding a highway. Her luck turned in the town of Burney Falls. She called REI, where she'd bought her boots. Explaining her situation, she was amazed when they agreed to send a brand new pair one size larger, free, via overnight mail. But the boots didn't arrive next day. A mix-up. They wouldn't come for another 5 days. She couldn't wait. She had to keep moving. So she called REI again, asking them to send the boots to her next stop, Castle Crags, 83 miles away. Hanging up, she looked at her old, evil boots dangling from her pack. She couldn't bring herself to put them back on, and she couldn't hike 83 miles in duct-tape sandals. This far is far enough, she thought. She was ready to quit. But then she remembered something an astrologer had told her years before. The astrologer said her father, who'd abandoned her as a child, had wounded her. To heal the wound, she'd said, you're going to have to get on that horse and ride into battle like a warrior. So with a fresh roll of duct tape, she rebuilt her sandals and began the long walk to Castle Crags. The journey through Northern California was a blur of pain, endurance, and unexpected beauty. She met other hikers, Rex, a gregarious gay man from Phoenix, and Stacy and Trina, the first women she'd hiked with. She learned Greg had quit because of the snow. So had many others. The fact that she was still going, despite everything, began to feel like a small miracle. By the time she reached Seod Valley, her last California stop, she was a different person. She was tough, a seasoned hiker, also walking on 2 stumps of raw flesh. Her feet were in constant, agonizing pain. But she kept walking. She walked until reaching Oregon's border. And as she stepped from one state to the next, it felt like both ending and beginning. She'd walked 900 miles through California. Oregon was a green tunnel, dense forest of Douglas firs and mountain hemlocks. Beautiful, but bringing new challenges. The weather turned cold and rainy. One morning, she woke to find her tent covered in thin snow. It was August 18th, her mother's 50th birthday. Sudden white-hot rage filled her. She was furious at her mother for not being alive. She spent the day hiking, cataloging every single one of her mother's faults: her optimism, insularity, failure to push Cheryl toward better colleges. Fuck her, she thought. So angry she stopped walking and wailed, loud, tearless brays. But as anger subsided, profound understanding replaced it. Her mother had done the best she could, and her best was pretty damn good. She'd given Cheryl everything that mattered. She'd loved her with every ounce of her being. I'll always be with you, she'd promised. And in that moment, Cheryl finally felt it. The final weeks were a hopscotch across Oregon. She met 3 young hikers, Rick, Richie, and Josh, who dubbed her the Queen of the PCT because of the kindness she seemed to attract from strangers. She visited Crater Lake's stunning, unbelievable blue, a mountain that had blown its top and healed into something new. And with every step, she felt herself getting closer, not just to trail's end, but to the end of her sorrow. On her 94th day, she walked her last few miles. The trail descended 4,000 feet into the Columbia River Gorge. She could feel the river pulling her, a great magnet to the north. She spent her last night camped by Eagle Creek, only 6 miles from her destination. Next morning, she floated those last miles, buoyed by pure, unadulterated joy. She walked through Cascade Locks until she saw it, the Bridge of the Gods, an elegant steel truss bridge spanning the Columbia River, connecting Oregon to Washington. Her finish line. She walked to the bridge's concrete stanchion and placed her hand on it. She looked down at the river flowing beneath. She'd arrived. She'd done it. After walking 3 months, over 1,100 miles, she'd reached the end. She'd walked herself from lost to found. What strikes me most about Wild isn't the incredible physical achievement of hiking over 1,000 miles. It's the unflinching honesty of the emotional journey running alongside it. Cheryl Strayed doesn't paint herself as a hero. She shows us her flaws, mistakes, moments of profound weakness and foolishness. She's sometimes what a fellow hiker jokingly calls her, the hapless hiker. And that's precisely what makes her story so powerful and relatable. This isn't about conquering a mountain. It's about learning to carry an unbearable weight and discovering you're strong enough to do it. The backpack monster is the perfect metaphor. In the beginning, it's this external, crushing burden she can barely lift. It represents all the grief, regret, and pain she's carried since her mother's death. But as she walks day after day, she gets stronger. The pack doesn't get lighter, but her ability to carry it grows. She learns to live with it, to make it part of her. It's no longer her against the pack. They become one. That's a profound lesson about grief. We don't get over great loss. We learn to carry it. We integrate it into who we are, and we keep walking. Another beautiful theme is the unexpected kindness of strangers. When Cheryl felt completely alone in the world, the trail provided a new kind of family. From miners who took her in, to men who gave her beer and licorice, to hikers who shared knowledge and food, she encountered generosity at almost every turn. It's a powerful reminder that even when we feel most isolated, we're all connected, and people, for the most part, are good. They want to help. Sometimes we just have to be vulnerable enough to receive it. So what can we take from this journey? First, the power of putting one foot in front of the other. When Cheryl decided to hike the PCT, she didn't have a grand healing plan. She just had an idea. She didn't know how she'd do it. She just started. And when the journey became overwhelmingly difficult, she didn't focus on the 1,000 miles ahead. She focused on the next step, and the next, and the next. This is powerful strategy for any overwhelming challenge in life. Don't worry about the entire mountain. Just focus on the next 10 steps. Second, this story teaches us you don't have to be perfect to start. You don't need all the answers or the right gear. Cheryl was profoundly unprepared. But she was willing. She was willing to be a beginner, to be humbled, to learn as she went. The trail was her teacher, and its lessons were often brutal, but they were real. It reminds us that courage isn't the absence of fear or doubt. It's taking action despite it. Finally, Wild testifies to the healing power of wilderness. In our modern world, we're so disconnected from Earth's natural rhythms. We spend our time, as one trail founder said, sitting on soft seats in motors and soft seats in movies. Cheryl's journey forced her to reconnect with something primal and fundamental. Physical suffering on the trail didn't allow her to wallow in emotional pain. She had to focus on survival, finding water, treating blisters, pushing her body forward, and in that raw, immediate focus, something began to shift. The wilderness didn't give her answers. It gave her a space big enough to hold her grief, and the clarity to find her own way through. It taught her she was part of something vast and beautiful and resilient, and that she, too, could be resilient. That was the book summary of Wild by Cheryl Strayed. We've touched on the major points of her incredible journey today, but honestly, a summary can only scratch the surface. The real power of this book is in Cheryl's voice, her humor, vulnerability, and the raw beauty of her prose. This summary is designed to give you a sense of the journey, to help you decide if this is a path you want to walk alongside her. If anything we've talked about today has resonated, I encourage you to pick up a copy. Reading it isn't just about learning the story. It's an experience that can genuinely change how you think about loss, strength, and the wild, untamed wilderness within yourself. A link to the book is in the description below. Also, if you found this summary valuable, please show some support by hitting that like button and subscribing to the channel. It lets us know we're on the right track and ensures you won't miss our next deep dive into another life-changing book. Let's keep exploring these powerful ideas together.